Egypt participates in the global alliance against hunger and poverty. United States Hawks team expresses hope after talks with Lebanon's Berri. And 3 Palestinians have been killed in an Israeli onslaught on the West Bank's Jenin. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time and you're watching Qnews. We begin today's bulletin with the latest updates from Rio de Janeiro on the second day of the G20 summit. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi announced Egypt's participation in the global alliance against hunger and poverty at the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, commending Brazil's leadership in fostering international cooperation. In his address, President el-Sisi called for an immediate ceasefire to protect civilians in Palestine and Lebanon, emphasizing the humanitarian crises caused by ongoing Israeli aggression. The Egyptian leader stressed the need for global partnership to combat hunger and poverty, proposing initiatives such as concessional financing, technology transfer, and food security programs. He also highlighted Egypt's plan to establish a global grain hub to strengthen supply chain resilience and enhance food security worldwide. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. The talks focused on strengthening bilateral relations, building on the strong historical ties between Egypt and the UAE at both the official and popular levels. The meeting emphasized the two countries' commitment to continued cooperation across various sectors, with the aim of fulfilling their people's aspirations for development and progress. Chinese and Russian foreign ministers have discussed bilateral ties, the conflict in Ukraine, and the situation on the Korean Peninsula on the sidelines of the Group of 20 meeting in Brazil. In a statement, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that Beijing is willing to work with Russia to further strengthen comprehensive strategic coordination, and added that the two sides also exchanged views on the Ukraine crisis. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has met Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba at the G20 summit to discuss trade and security, among other issues. The Prime Minister spoke about deepening defense cooperation and discussed the potential of higher tariffs on US imports, which have been proposed by incoming President Donald Trump. China's President Xi Jinping has met with Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Brazil. Chinese media reported that Xi called on two countries to strengthen coordination and cooperation, noting that there was no fundamental conflict on the interest between the two sides. Xi said that as long as China and Australia could uphold mutual respect and seek common ground while shelving differences, their relations would see sound development. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has held bilateral talks with leaders from Britain, France, Italy and Indonesia during the G20 summit in Brazil. Following Modi's meeting with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Downing Street announced that the talks on free trade agreement with India will resume early next year after being delayed by elections in both countries. The UK also aims to establish a new strategic partnership with India, focusing on cooperation in security, education, technology and climate change. The G20 summit in Brazil has entered its second day, spotlighting innovative funding strategies to combat climate change and global inequality, while amplifying the voices of the Global South in global governance.
The G20 summit in Brazil entered its second day with a focus on innovative funding solutions to address climate change and reduce global inequality. Key discussions included proposals for a progressive tax on ultra-wealthy to finance social and environmental programs, alongside calls for enhanced multilateral cooperation to resolve geopolitical conflicts. Brazil has presented the summit as a platform for amplifying the voices of the Global South, championing equitable decision-making in global governance. The interconnected nature of poverty and climate vulnerability has been a central theme, with world leaders urging governments and private sectors to collaborate on comprehensive solutions. Significant strides were made on the summit's opening day, including Brazil's launch of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, aligning with the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Leaders also endorsed the Tropical Forest Forever Fund, aimed at protecting tropical forests while advancing socio-economic inclusion and prompting a transition to a low-carbon economy. Efforts to reform multilateral governance structures have also taken center stage. Brazil has proposed a conference to review the UN Charter, seeking to enhance the representation of emerging economies in global decision-making processes. Under the leadership of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, the summit has emphasized reducing inequality, fostering social inclusion, and addressing disparities in global governance. With bold proposals and a transformative agenda, the G20 aims to tackle urgent global challenges while shaping policies for a more equitable and sustainable future.
For more analysis, we now move to Henny in our newsroom. To you, Henny.
Thank you, Raham. Ladies and gentlemen, for further analysis of the second day of the G20 summit, we're joined from Cairo by former Assistant Foreign Minister, Ambassador Mohammed Higazi. Your Excellency, welcome to Q News. First off, sir, what can you tell us about the key discussions surrounding the reform of the United Nations Security Council during the summit?
I think the second day is as important as the first day, which insisted on the global social balance and the importance of the unity and confronting in coalition the poverty and the requirements of the needy, particularly in Africa and the third world. So the first day is reference to the global declaration to eradicate poverty led by Brazil and President Lula da Silva was important. As you know, that the global structure and the work of the Security Council is so fundamental to peace and security worldwide. And as we have witnessed the disability of the current system, the role of the Security Council being away from the real confrontation is a clear reflection of the lack of consistency and the lack of ability and resource of the members of the international community in conducting their role in facing political instability and conflict over the years. The Security Council, as the body in charge of maintaining peace and security, is a key institution, fundamental to stability of the international security and political system. The leaders have clearly identified the Security Council as the institution through which the international will and determination towards peace and security has to be reformed. So the reform is in itself a necessity to us all. We have seen and witnessed the war in Ukraine between Russia and the West on the Ukrainian territory is a clear manifestation of the disability of and ineffectiveness of the Security Council role, in spite of the fact that this is the body that has to carry its responsibility in maintaining peace and security. So today's meeting was a call from the international players, the G20, that a reform in the Security Council should allow the countries to play its lawful role, like Africa, which is 54 countries not represented by one permanent member. And I think we have to recall the African Declaration of Esselwini, which has identified African views in regards to reform of the Security Council. Countries like India, like Germany, like Japan, they all inspired, and they all awaiting their role to play. And I think the agreement today is that a necessity and an obligation on us all to reform the security.
Well, Sir, do you think that there was sufficient consensus among G20 leaders on the proposed Security Council reforms, or were there points of disagreement?
I tell you, the matter was on the table for many years. I don't have reason to believe that rationale will prevail and a reform will happen. Let us be realistic. There is certain interest to the five permanent members contradicting in essence, and did prevent this very important goal to happen. It will remain for a while. I don't think that in the disarray and the conflict that we are witnessing is an environment conducive to reach a consensus regarding reform. But we have to keep hoping that the G20, being the custodian of the decision-making process in the reform issue, are all gathered, and they are the ones to decide not only in the reform of the Security Council, but also in regards to issues pertaining, for example, to the blockage that is happening towards the finance of climate emissions, and the Baku negotiation in Azerbaijan today is blocked by the main players gathered in Rio de Janeiro. I mean the G20 economy constituting almost the most important economic power in the world. So reform, like financing climate emission, will remain in the hands of the powerful economy gathered in Rio de Janeiro.
Mr. Ambassador, other than the climate change, what are other key takeaways so far from the G20 summit in Brazil in terms of global cooperation and international relations?
I tell you, as long as war is the language, as long as leaders of the G20 and most powerful nations like the United States still finance crimes against humanity like this in Gaza to attain political reason, as long as wars prevail, talking about harmony. How come that we can reach this harmony between the global players while we have the West incomplete fighting Russia on the Ukrainian territory? How come that we are talking about peace and tranquility and a leadership by the G20 while we are seeing the war against the innocent people of Gaza, to curb on the Iranian influence in the Middle East, sacrificing all humanitarian noble rules and principles. The matter is quite clear. We are facing a reality, unfortunately, that is pertaining to the powerful, that is pertaining to those who want to dictate their views by using force, no matter this policy backlash to human dignity, as we witness in Gaza, in Palestine.
Former Assistant Foreign Minister, Ambassador Mohammed Higazi, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us. And now, Reham, back to you.
Thank you so much, Eddie, for that interview. We now move on to the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein has expressed hope after his talks with Lebanon's Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri in Beirut. Hochstein said that his visit aims to facilitate a decision, stressing that it's ultimately up to the warring parties to reach a conclusion to this conflict. However, he noted progress in bridging gaps between Lebanon and Israel on resolving the conflict. The Israeli Occupation Army has stated that about 20 projectiles were identified as crossing from Lebanon into Israel, with the air defense systems intercepting some of them. The statement added that the sirens sounded in the regions of Haifa Bay and Western Galilee, while a spokesperson for the Israeli Ambulance Services said 4 people have been slightly injured in central Israel. Two Lebanese citizens have been killed in an Israeli bombing of the Shaiha area in the nation's southern suburb. The occupation warplanes and artillery have targeted several towns in southern Lebanon, leaving widespread destruction of buildings and infrastructure. Now we move to the latest developments in Gaza. The Palestinian Health Ministry has announced that 3 Palestinians have been killed while others were injured in the occupation's large-scale military onslaught on Jenin and its camps. Since last night, a large number of military vehicles searched and raided a number of civilian homes, causing widespread destruction. Palestinian media added that the Israeli bulldozers began to demolish a number of major roads, which resulted in the Jenin Education Directorate announcing that today's school day would be held electronically. Palestinian media reports that Israeli occupation forces have targeted several areas in Gaza, killing and injuring several people. The occupation's warplanes targeted a group of citizens west of the Nusayrat camp in central Gaza, killing one Palestinian, and raided the vicinity of the Toba area in the Jabalia camp in northern Gaza. Northern Gaza also saw occupation forces target civilian homes in Beit Lahia. Israeli occupation forces have detained at least 12 Palestinians from various parts of the West Bank during a series of overnight raids. The detentions occurred in the governorates of Hebron, Qalqiliyah, Jenin, Ramallah, Tubas and Tulkarm. Palestinian media reported that Israeli occupation forces set a Palestinian house on fire in the Jenin refugee camp this morning and prevented civil defense crews from reaching it. Gazan health authorities have reported that Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October 7th of last year has risen to almost 44,000, with more than 104,000 individuals injured. The statement also reported that Israeli occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the last 24 hours, killing at least 50 Palestinians and injuring 110 others. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that the number of North Korean troops stationed inside Russia could grow to 100,000. In an address to Parliament on the 1,000th day of the Russian invasion, Zelensky said that 2025 will be decisive in determining who wins the war and presented a resilience plan to Ukraine.
Some elections or something like this at Ukraine's expense, Putin is focused on winning.
A spokesperson for Russian President Vladimir Putin says that the doctrine on nuclear deterrence has been revised in line with the current situation. He explained that Putin signed a new doctrine that lowers the threshold for using nuclear weapons. The revision comes as the Russia-Ukraine conflict marks its 1,000th day and follows the U.S. decision to allow Ukraine to strike targets inside Russia with longer-range missiles. A spokesperson also emphasized that Russia now reserves the right to use nuclear weapons if it faces aggression with conventional weapons that pose a critical threat to its sovereignty or territorial integrity. Russia says its forces have conducted strikes on energy infrastructure and military facilities in Ukraine. In a daily update, the Russian Defense Ministry reported attacks on Ukrainian troop concentrations and equipment in 135 locations over the past 24 hours. The ministry also claims strikes on military infrastructure at airports, energy facilities, and the downing of 106 Ukrainian drones. These claims have not been independently verified. The foreign ministers of Poland, France, Germany and Italy have met in Warsaw to discuss Ukraine, the incoming Trump administration and the Middle East. The meeting was adjourned amid the Biden administration's approval of Ukraine using US-made missiles to strike deep into Russia, which marks a significant reversal in Washington's policy on the Ukraine-Russia conflict. The change in doctrine has been warmly welcomed by most EU heads of state. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. Egypt participates in the global alliance against hunger and poverty during the G20 summit. United States Hawks team expresses hope after talks with Lebanon's Berri. And 3 Palestinians have been killed in an Israeli onslaught on the West Bank's Jenin. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more here on Q News.